Yeah,
I meant to also say that, I take your point completely about the fact that consultation is hampered by this issue that you just raised. However, there are lots of things in sort of city planning that don't necessarily have a spatial implication immediately, which you could consult on anyways.
okay, yeah.
Just a quick point on the technology debate, Dr. Arun Mehra, the emphasis on technology being a double-edged weapon, and Anuradha giving those examples. I'll give counter examples. Two of the best examples for inclusive development in the world, A has been the mobile telephone, which has really empowered the average man in his job and things like that. In fact, to the extent that the Economist magazine says if there's a Nobel Prize in development, it should go to the mobile phone. Secondly, the e-governance thing in India, everything being digitalized, land records, birth records and all, so that everyone can just sort of push a button, even the poor also, through someone and get their records. You and me will have batchmates, the poor man doesn't have. So thanks to technology, this great inclusive process is going on in India. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have the mic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think Anurag is bringing it out. They're transactional processes. Giving information, getting information, conducting a transaction. Technology is great for that. When you talk of deliberation, where you want people to hear something, to reflect on it, to reflect back, to have a deliberation, technology, in fact, because we seem so sexy, we short circuit all that. We make it more difficult.
Yeah, I'll come to you first. Yeah.
I wanted to question the notion that inclusion necessarily implies direct participation. And we seem to assume that the poor or the less privileged have all the time and means at their disposal to take part in these processes of direct participation. And I'd like to, I think, move the discussion to what is it that can trigger the inclusion of the interests of the poor in decision-making processes related to planning and service delivery. And I think there's a very good example from 20th century England, which, in which the inclusion of the interests of the labor classes was actually triggered by the extremely high replacement cost of labor that industrialists were having to face because of the fact that poor health and housing facilities were causing labor to die at a very high rate. So I think it's worth discussing what are the triggers that will necessarily incentivize decision makers to include the interests of the poor in decision-making processes related to planning and service delivery, rather than thinking that direct participation is the only means to this outcome.
Okay, good. Yes.
Yeah, Anuradha has spoken about the need to build trust if it comes to encourage suitable participation in planning. Maybe I go a step further and just say it's also important to work on the empowerment side, because after the planning, and I agree one needs to see what is a meaningful planning and participation in planning and how much and how to do it. But once something is planned, and let's say a typical DPR is also prepared and has been sanctioned with a lot of participation until it gets implemented, you need to see to it that the community is empowered to then also bring in its views in the implementation process. And especially if it comes to in situ slum upgrading, where you can't work with traditional tender processes, where some big builder comes and builds a big house and it will not work like that. So somehow this would require strategies, instruments, and also other skills in the municipal corporations. There's a need for people who have a little bit, I wouldn't say social workers, but there needs to be a kind of a team of people who know how to link to the communities without, in a meaningful manner, to bridge the supply and demand side in a manner which is manageable for both sides.
Okay, thank you. Did you? Yeah.
I just wanted to reinforce what I have experienced as being one of the big benefits of consultative process in the formulation of city development plans under the JNURM in Madhya Pradesh, for instance. definitely it leads to a more robust project formulation. The problem in the process was not managing the consultation process. It was fairly diverse as a body of citizens. This was a city of 300,000 population. But we did manage to do that, and we used technology at a very basic level, at least start using maps and even show projections of built form, which are easy technologies now. The problems came in explaining benefits. And I think, again, Ishwar, you talked about research agendas. I think this is a very important research agenda to figure out how do we model and explain benefits of a particular kind of project. I'll take the example from this city. It's a religious pilgrimage place. It's called Burhanpur in Madhya Pradesh, both for the Sikh community as well as the Bohras. The Sikhs and the Bohras both wanted to fund an airport for Burhanpur. It also has a very large urban poor population. We actually failed to work out a method by which we could explain the so-called trickle-down effects of having an airport in that city, what that tourism development would do for the city and so on. Up to a point you can talk about internal rates of return and so on, but the citizens want to hear something different. And we actually failed to do that. So in the timeline for the city development plan, we pushed it to 15 years from now, this airport will be delivered. However, the community was willing to fund it tomorrow. And if we were able to work out a sophisticated enough way of explaining benefits to the city, they might well have developed a very different kind of city economy. So I think we do need to research more on project formulation and how do we model the outcomes of projects, right at the outset before we actually.
Good. Actually, this is a good example, and I wanted to ask Jayan in URM, because this was one of the requirements. How did it operate or work in other places? For example, in your own case, were the poor able to express their views on some of these, or was it difficult to get them?
I think across the board, actually, the lack of a voice was voiced by all sections. It wasn't just the poor saying, hey, nobody listens to us. It was the established rich community of the city also saying, well, the government has never asked us what we want or what we need. So I believe it wasn't really a class specific problem. It was simply that the process of conceptualizing what needs to be built as infrastructure, no one was ever asked.
Okay, good, yes.
A related point that I wanted to make about this issue of airports.
Is the mic on?
Oh, I have to speak into it. Well, there was this example from LA, for example, where it was exactly the same thing. They wanted to expand the airport, and the land is obviously expensive, and there was a lot of opposition. There were many, many interests around it. But what was interesting was that there was this existing set of networks that involved or that incorporated that involved the poor. Not the poor necessarily, but these were unions to some extent, worker organizations and others that saw this as an opportunity. They said, we don't want to hold up the expansion, but there are other things that will need to be put on the table. For example, the voice pollution that's generated will harm this group of people, and so will there be some funding that can be collected to make sure that there is some insulation. Second, will you be able to hire people who will work on the expansion of the program from within the city? So they were able to negotiate a community benefits agreement that helped the city but also had larger inclusive consequences.
Good.
So having these institutional supports in place, even if they are not active all the time, can be extremely useful.
Good. Thank you. Any other comment here? Yeah.
Basically, my question is to Dr. Bimal. I just wanted to understand, largely the TPS scheme has been implemented in suburban areas. Just wanted to quick clarification that we know after Bhuj reconstruction, TPS scheme has been implemented entire historic core of the Bhuj city. Just wanted to clarify, would it have been possible to implement a TPS if there had not been a earthquake in Bhuj city? Because core city has a lot of these houses and tearing apart all the buildings and then laying down the roads would have been very difficult. I mean, in the normal circumstances. So would there be any possibility to implement a TPS in a historic core?
It's a very specific question, but the simple answer to it is yes. And in fact, it's done very often. We have many illegal developments, which are as dense as any center city area, which are legalized by doing a TPS scheme in that area. It's actually just a tool. You can use it in various places. Of course, when an area is a greenfield site, you have a lot more free hand to do what you want to do. It's not a greenfield site, then you're constrained. But you manage to get things done.
Okay. Yes.
Sir,
One
I
more.
have a submission. I'm not anti-involvement or anti-participation, but our experience has shown that people are either not interested or they do not take part in whenever there is an event or whenever we organize, and we've done so many CDPs. I'm sure that most of the people here have the same experience. You have to pull through the people to come and participate. And even if they participate, either it's a personal agenda that I want a road from X point to Y point, or I want this, I want that. There is no collective participation, and there is no vision for a community as a whole. So how do we incorporate this kind of concepts? And there is one other issue is like the scale. One, if there are smaller communities and people at a smaller cities like below 1 lakh or anything, participation is definitely higher than in a metro city or a mega city. So how do we address these issues? It's an open question for everyone here.
That's why I asked about the JNURM experience, since there are many cities where this may have been tried out in some form or the other, like yours. What is the experience? What you said with just now is really true. It is true there is a lot of indifference. But whether, if organizations that represent various groups come, they also wouldn't show up? Individuals may not, but there are organizations of the poor and NGOs working on various things. They also wouldn't come?
They do show up, but then I think they have their own personal agenda in a sense that they want to promote their own interest if they have a specific interest. So that's how the experience has
Sure,
been.
yeah, of course. Yeah, any other comment? Yes. We'll make that the last comment? Yeah. The last comment.
Yeah, it's a rejoinder to what Dr. Anuradha Joshi was mentioning about the rental housing market in India. If we look at the report of the technical committee on housing shortage, we find that the housing shortage is of around 18 million, whereas 11 million houses are lying vacant in urban India. So if there could be some reallocation of the vacant houses to the urban poor, I think much of the shortage would have been met.
Okay. Do you want to add anything, Anuradha? We are going to conclude now. Yeah.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to flag a few things that have come up that I think are really important. The first critical question, I think, is the question of, how do we actually build the interests, what Sunita asked, how do we build the interests of the poor, the excluded, the marginalized into processes without necessarily having them participate? Having civil society organizations is one mode. Ideally, obviously, the electoral political process should work well, because, if they're 70% of the electorate in a city like Delhi, for example, then, their needs should be reflected, but they're not, clearly, because of other forms of politics that are in operation. And which is why I was emphasizing a little more the public good elements of the possibilities of inclusion. If you think about the history of sanitation in England, why is it that public sanitation came about? It was because the public health impacts of poor sanitation of these workers was causing a health problem where both the well-off and the poor suffered. So sort of looking at some of the broader public good elements of inclusion would be, I think, quite an important element. The other quick point